योग केवल शरीर के लिए नहीं है। शरीर के लिए तो अपने आप स्वाभाविक रूप से लाभ मिलता ही है। योग का जो मुख्य लक्ष्य है कि हम समाधि को प्राप्त कर जाएं। सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिना, तुरंत नहीं आता। सर्वे बाय द साधना।
Although yoga appears to focus on controlling the body, it is in fact an ancient spiritual discipline, a form of meditation, harnessing the energies of the body to tame the mind. Some yogis learn to sit without moving for hours, breathing more and more slowly until they seem to be barely breathing at all.
All kinds of trance states are possible through meditation. If you hold the mind, if you concentrate the mind on a single object, be it a word or a candle flame or a sound, it's possible to transport the mind into all kinds of interesting places. The person who was to become the Buddha was very good at all of those practices. He was a super student, doing these practices, taking them to their limit, and no matter what he did in these practices, he was still stuck in the pain that he set out with.
He ascends to these very rarefied states of consciousness, but it's not permanent. And it does not bring penetrating truth into the nature of reality. So these become a temporary escape from the problem of existence, but they don't solve the problem.
Siddhartha apprenticed himself to another popular guru, but the results were the same. The thought occurred to me, he said later, this practice does not lead to direct knowledge, to deeper awareness. Disenchanted, he left this master too. Siddhartha continued to drift south, still searching for the answer to his questions. Why do human beings suffer? Is there any escape?
He's trying and trying and searching, and he already experienced extreme luxury, so now he tries extreme deprivation.
Among the renunciants, asceticism was a common spiritual practice, punishing the body as a way to attain serenity and wisdom. Siddhartha fell in with 5 other ascetics, and soon was outdoing them in mortifying the flesh, subjecting his body to extremes of hardship and pain.
The body represents a fundamental problem. Old age brings a decrepitude to the body. Sickness brings pain and suffering to the body. And death is ultimately the cessation of the functioning of the body. So there was a sense that if you could punish the body sufficiently, you could escape its influence. You could transcend some of the limitations that the body seemed to impose.
The ascetic pursues the truth by taking the requirements of survival down to the absolute minimum possible. Barely enough food to stay alive, no protection from the elements, no heat. Sit in the cold, sit in the rain. Meditate fiercely for all the hours of awakening.
The step of renunciation, of shedding everything, of dying, the feeling that one is dying to one's life as it was, is essential to being reborn as someone who sees.
Ascetics can still be seen in India, firm in the belief that by subduing the flesh, they can gain spiritual power.
सत्य क्या है? एक टाइम बुझे लेने में 24 घंटे में एक सेकंड अपने को प्रत्यक्ष बता देता है कि सत्य क्या है. हाँ, छोड़ दिया दुराचार, सुलाओ बंद. इसलिए सोचता हूँ कि हर चीज मोह नहीं रखता. ये मार्ग जो आगे बढ़ने के लिए इसमें मैं मोह नहीं रखता. मोह
Emaciated, exhausted, Siddhartha punished himself for 6 years, trying to put an end to the cravings that beset him.
He tortures himself, trying to destroy anything within himself that he sees as bad. The spiritual traditions of that time said you can be liberated if you eliminate everything that's human, everything that's coarse and vulgar, every bit of anger, every bit of desire. If you wipe that out with force of will, then you can go into some kind of transcendental state. And the Buddha tried all that, and he became, the most anorectic of the anorectic ascetics. He was eating 1 grain of rice per day. He was drinking his own urine. He was standing on 1 foot. He was sleeping on nails. He did it all to the utmost.
My body slowly became extremely emaciated, Siddhartha said. My limbs became like the jointed segments of vine or bamboo stems. My spine stood out like a string of beads. My ribs jutted out like the jutting rafters of an old abandoned building. The gleam of my eyes appeared to be sunk deep in my eye sockets, like the gleam of water deep in a well. My scalp shriveled and withered like a green bitter gourd, shriveled and withered in the heat and wind.
What he was trying to do was pushing his body to the most extreme that he could. But then he realized that from that, he cannot gain what he wants. Trying to torture the body becomes too much. The whole attention is given to the body, nothing else.
He surrendered himself completely to the hard training that he was given. And what he discovered, having tried this completely for many years, was that he had not answered his question. It hadn't worked. He was on the verge of death, dying, unawakened, when he remembered something. He remembered a day when he was young and sat by the river with his father, and the perfection of the world as it was simply gave itself to him.
Years before, when Siddhartha was a small boy, his father, the king, had taken him to a spring planting festival. While he watched the ceremonial dancing, he looked down at the grass. He thought about the insects and their eggs, destroyed as the field was planted. He was overwhelmed with sadness.
One great taproot of Buddhism is compassion, which is the deep affection that we feel for everything because we're all in it together, be it other human beings, other animals, the planet as a whole, the creatures of this planet, the trees and rivers of this planet. Everything is connected.
It was a beautiful day. His mind drifted. As if by instinct, he crossed his legs in the yoga pose of meditation. And the natural world paid him homage. As the sun moved through the sky, the shadows shifted. But the shadow of the rose apple tree where he sat remained still. He felt a sense of pure joy.
The joy that he found is in the world that is already broken. It's in this transitory world that we're all a part of. And the fabric of this world, despite the fact that it can seem so horrible, the underlying fabric of this world actually is that joy that he recovered. That was his great insight. But, he says, I can't sustain a feeling of joy like this if I don't take any food, so I better eat something. And then at that moment, a village maiden mysteriously appears carrying a bowl of rice porridge.
And she said to him, "Here, eat." That moment of generosity and release, when he accepted the rice, was a decision towards life. It was what in the Christian tradition might be called grace, that you cannot do it completely on your own. And in Christianity, the grace comes from the divine. In the story of the Buddha, the grace comes from the ordinary kind heart of a girl who sees somebody starving and says, "Eat."
And there's something beautiful. Whenever I remember that story, it makes me so happy because I see the heart of Buddha as the person he was, like the Siddhartha. This dish was the dish he used to be fed by his stepmother, rice pudding. He was missing that so much. And then he remembered maybe further and further, and he remembered about his wife, about his son, and the deepest emotions that he had suppressed. They overpowered, they came up, they were still there. He had a feeling of missing, he had a feeling of seeing his son, and a feeling of being near his loved ones. They were so powerful. Oh, this must have soaked his whole entire being.
He was actually an utter failure. He had been clinging to the path of asceticism, and when he took the food, what followed was a return of his original question. Life is painful. Life involves change. This is still a problem. The problem didn't disappear.
It wasn't long before the ascetics who had been Siddhartha's companions found him eating and turned away in disgust. Siddhartha loves luxury, they said. He has forsaken his spiritual practice. He has become extravagant.
But the man who will become the Buddha realizes that extreme deprivation isn't the way to go. We can live as normal human beings. We can eat and drink. And in fact, we kind of need to eat and drink and be normal human beings in order to break through, in order to attain the kind of realization that he was looking for.
Siddhartha had put his faith in 2 gurus. They hadn't helped him. He'd punished his mind and body. That had almost killed him. Now, he knew what he must do. To find the answer to his questions, he would look within and trust himself. Bodh Gaya is a small town in northeastern India. Throngs of pilgrims have come here from all over the world for more than 16 centuries. For Buddhists, there are hundreds of holy places, but none more sacred than this one. Bodh Gaya is the sacred point from which the Buddhist faith radiates. Some pilgrims travel great distances, reciting prayers and prostrating themselves every step of the way. It is their Mecca and Jerusalem. Their Holy of Holies is not the imposing temple beside them, but a simple fig tree, Ficus religiosa, the Bodhi tree. The tree, it is said, is descended from the Buddha's tongue. Every pilgrim knows the story of how Siddhartha, after accepting the rice milk from the young girl, put aside the rags he was wearing, bathed himself in a nearby river, and strengthened, sat down in the shade of the Bodhi tree and began to meditate.
It was springtime. The moon was full. Before the sun would rise, Siddhartha's long search would be over.
He sat down under a Bodhi tree in the shelter of the natural world in all of its beauty and fullness. And he said, I will not move from this place until I have solved my problem.
Let my skin and sinews and bones dry up, together with all the flesh and blood of my body, he said. I welcome it. But I will not move from this spot until I have attained the supreme and final wisdom. All at once, Mara, Lord of Desire, rose to challenge him. With an army of demons, he attacked. Siddhartha did not move, and their weapons turned into flowers.
Mara is the ruler of this realm of desire, this world that we all live in. And what he's afraid Siddhartha is going to do when he attains enlightenment and becomes the Buddha is conquer that world. That is, he's going to do away with desire. He's going to wreck the whole game.
Mara did not give up. He sent his 3 daughters to seduce him. Siddhartha remained still.
When he faces Mara, he faces himself and his own destructive capacity. But he's not the warrior trying to do battle with those qualities. He's discovered his own capacity for equanimity. He has become like, the top of the great Himalayan mountains, The weather is passing over him, storms are raging around him, and he sits like the top of the mountain, impassive, not in a trance state, totally aware of everything. So he frustrates Mara.
Siddhartha resisted every temptation Mara could devise. The Lord of Desire had one final test. He demanded to know who would testify that Siddhartha was worthy of attaining ultimate wisdom, and his demon army rose up to support him. Siddhartha said nothing. He reached down and touched the ground, and the earth shuddered. Mara's demons fled.
The Buddha reaches down and with his finger touches the earth. He says, "The earth is my witness." He said, "Mara, you are not the earth. The earth is right here beneath my finger." And the earth is what we're talking about. Accepting the earth, not owning the earth, not possessing the earth, but the earth just as it is, abused and exploited and despised and rejected and plowed and mined, spat on and everything else, it's still the earth, and we owe everything to it.
Siddhartha meditated throughout the night, and all his former lives passed before him.
He remembers all his previous lives, infinite numbers of previous lives. Female and male and every other race and every other being in the vast ocean of life forms. And he remembered that all viscerally, so that means his awareness expanded to be all, so that all the moments of the past were completely present to him.
He gains the power to see the process of birth, death, and rebirth that all creatures go through. He's given this sort of cosmic vision of the workings of the entire universe.
As the morning star appeared, he roared like a lion. "My mind," he said, "is at peace." The heavens shook, and the Bodhi tree rained down flowers. He had become the awakened one, the Buddha.
Something new opens up for him, which he calls nirvana, or which he calls awakening.
He said, "At this moment, all beings and I awaken together." So it was not just him, it was all the universe. He touched the earth, as earth is my witness. Seeing this morning star, all things and I awaken together.
It's not like entering a new state. It's uncovering or surrendering to the reality that has always been there. He realized he'd always been in nirvana, that nirvana was always the case. Your reality itself is nirvana. It's the unreality, it's your ignorance that makes you think you're this self-centered, separate being trying to fight off an overwhelming universe.